What is going on, Diesel Nation? We're excited to have you guys with us today on the Diesel Podcast. Today's guest, he had emailed into us and he said, "Hey, my name's Mike. I used to own a diesel shop. I have been dealing with an EPA case for a couple years now, and I'd love to come onto your podcast, talk about what it was like, how we were served, what the raid was like, talk about the process financially, mentally, emotionally, and be able to educate us on what exactly transpires, what the charges are." And he really wants to be able to help people out there, business owners that, or people who are just thinking about starting, a shop or something like that, help them avoid these mistakes. So we offered, to have him on our platform, be able to chat with you guys. So I'm really looking forward to asking him some questions that I've seen you guys ask on YouTube and, on our Discord and other places, specifically about emissions and what it's like to deal with the EPA and some of these things. Before we get to it though, I want to encourage you guys, if you want to save 20%, Kershaw's got a discount code for our listeners. You go to kershaw.kiausa.com, use code diesel20, and you can save 20% off site-wide. I know it's been a big hit with you guys. You guys have shared with me some of the things that you've gotten. It's really cool. So if you're looking for something for EDC, hunting, fishing, around the house, at the shop, you can save 20%. Just use code diesel20 at kershaw.kiausa.com. All right, let's get to today's episode with Mike and asking him what it's been like dealing with the EPA. Mike, welcome to the Diesel Podcast. I look forward to today's conversation, and I appreciate you reaching out to us to, explain what you went through, what you learned. And I think a lot of people, whether they're a shop or just a diesel truck owner, are going to find a lot of value and insights in what you're going to tell us today. So, welcome to the Diesel Podcast.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm happy to help out and, hopefully educate some people here and give them some knowledge.
If you could start with the background a little bit, what you did, what kind of company you had, and then we'll lead into the kind of 2-year journey that you're on.
Yeah, sure. So for those of those that don't know me, my name is Michael Hanzik. I was the original founder and one of the co-owners. There was 3 of us actually. One of the co-owners, though, of a company called Armor and Toys. We were based in Anchorage, Alaska, and there was, for about 4.5 years, we were basically a diesel performance focused shop. Did online sales, kind of covered, most of the industry, from the shop to just parts to online sales, kind of did it all.
With what happened, which people are going to know from the title, of it, what we're chatting about today.
Sure.
What was the first contact or that you had with the EPA, in regards to diesel performance parts?
Yeah. So essentially, we were rated, like I think a lot of people have, or a lot of shops have, at the end of 2020. I'll be honest, I want to say it was like October, but I could be off by a month on that. And essentially, they came after us. Our story is similar to a lot of others in the way they came in, investigated, shut us down, that sort of thing. And early on, it was kind of a lot of the typical stories you hear when people do get raided. They can't talk about things, they can't do. And basically, we had to let the process play out and go through it. Essentially, I mean, they came after us for delete devices. They, essentially, came after us because it is a criminal violation of the Clean Air Act. And more specifically, the charge that I'm, I guess, facing here or dealing with is, conspiracy to violate the Clean Air Act, which, can potentially have up to 5 years in jail. I mean, this is, not something that, I guess, it's not a slap on the wrist or a fine per se. Potentially people can be looking at federal felony, jail time for violation of the Clean Air Act there. So
there's a couple questions that I want to ask you, because I think as a diesel truck owner, enthusiast, we don't see or know really any of this. Like you mentioned, it's not really talked about.
Sure.
We'll just see a press release, 2 years or 3 years down the road. But with the raid part, what does that involve? Because somebody asked on an episode we did, well, how are they contacted? Like, I think he specifically said, are letters sent in the mail, they're ignored, and then they show up, or do they just show up, a handful of them? And
I can tell you, every case is a little bit different. Personally, for us, there was no letter sent. They showed up. It is treated. The offense is serious enough that it is treated as any other felony case. They have a full warrant. They serve you with the warrant. The EPA comes in. In our case, they had other, agents with them, local police. I mean, it was treated as any other federal criminal situation, right? Where they have a warrant to come in and search. So they did come in with police force, federal agent force, said, hey, basically, y'all stand here. We have a warrant. We're going to search your stuff. And, we basically hung out for the day and we'll, let them do their thing.
So I'm sure, that's a huge shock and surprise when it happens. And probably the next thing you think is, okay, I need to get a lawyer, and there's a lot I'm going to have to deal with. So what happened after that first visit for you guys?
I mean, moving forward, it was just the lawyer. There was a lot of paperwork for the first, probably 6 months. There was hey, you provide this. Here's the next step. Kind of from what my understanding is it's fairly similar to a lot of federal cases of similar nature. And by similar nature, I mean similar classification, right? They're not treating it as a felony, a federal murder charge, right? But it is a severe, I mean, it's put up right there with any other felony federal crime. So the process is very similar, right? Anybody that's ever been through that or knows somebody that's been through that, I mean, you can talk to them and say, hey, what is the steps of going through a case like this? And it's, fairly identical. Of course, obviously there's differences in cases a little bit here and there, but it's extremely similar of that. And then after about the first 6 months, it's pretty quiet, a lot of waiting, and then you start having court appearances, and then you start having the appearances with the attorney, with the the EPA or the U.S. Attorney's Office, and that sort of thing.
Now, when they're looking at parts or things, is it strictly just this exhaust kit? How many exhaust kits, or was it kind of all over the place with what kind of information they had that they were saying, hey, this violated the Clean Air Act?
So what they're looking at is, and in my specific case, like what I'm being charged with is tampering with the monitoring ability of tampering with the monitoring device in a way that basically significantly increases pollutants into the environment, right? That's what they're looking at. So I wouldn't say it's a specific, hey, just an EGR block off kit or just an exhaust kit or just this specific tuner. It is if you're tampering with that monitoring system in any sort of way, that would increase pollutants. That is, that's what I'm being charged with. That's what they're hitting me with. And that's what, we are essentially guilty of in this case.
One of the reasons that I was really excited to have you on the podcast is that this isn't really talked about or known, I think, to the end user. So, they think, hey, I want to do this with my truck, and having you on today to talk about specifically what you're facing, like, that is scary stuff. And it's not just a matter of, hey, we're going to send you a letter, take this off your website, or, oh, don't do this anymore. You've been dealing with it for years, and there's
right.
attorneys involved and repercussions to it. And so I wanted to turn the podcast over to you a little bit to be able to talk to other shop owners that are listening, other companies, or just diesel truck owners in general, so they understand, they get a firsthand look into what is actually taking place out there. This isn't just a one-off case. This is happening probably in every state all over the country, and it has been for a while.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're 100% correct in that. What I can tell you is that anybody that thinks they're getting away with it, they're not. It's only a matter of time, and at the end of the day, it's the federal government. They're very thorough. They're very on top of their stuff, a lot more so, than a lot of people, I think, give them credit for. And at the end of the day, I would definitely urge, anybody that is engaging in any sort of activity like this, the resources are out there. There's actually a document online referencing my notes here, basically was released in December of 2020 it was a December 2020 EPA enforcement alert, and it literally was titled aftermarket defeat devices and tampering are illegal and undermine vehicle emissions controls. So there was actually a release that the EPA put out there and said, look, this is what we're doing. This is exactly what we're doing. This is exactly what we're going to do to shut this down. And then they even have an email out there called tampering@epa.gov for people to not only get information if they wanted more information, but, say you had somebody that was tampering with stuff and you chose to, report that. I mean, that email is actually set up. So I think that there is, at least in our case, right, we thought, hey, look, this is a mild thing. There's some fines that might be associated with it. But hey, we kind of asked around other shops, legal advice, from attorneys that kind of dabbled in this. Oh, as long as your disclaimers are there, as long as you're, you make it clear to the end user, hey, this is on you kind of thing, right? And that's not truly the case. Disclaimers don't mean anything. Telling the end user, hey, this is on you if anything happens, it doesn't mean anything. At the end of the day, if you're violating the Clean Air Act as they have defined, then it is a federal criminal charge. It's, a felony. I mean, and that's the thing that you're facing. And it's not a situation of, a lot of times we think, okay, well, if we have an LLC or an S Corp or this or that, right? Like, no, if your company is engaging in that act, you are responsible for that. And that's exactly the way they're looking at it is, look, you had knowledge of it, you did this, you allowed it to go on in your company, therefore there will be repercussions.
That's really insightful because a lot of talk over the years was, this is a race vehicle, or we would hear, I don't live in a state that has emissions. I can do whatever I want. And I think with some previous episodes that we've talked about with a lawyer, it's a Clean Air Act. It's a federal law. So it doesn't matter what state that you're in. And, that's really insightful about the waiver part. Cause I know for a while that was a big thing and you would see it out there and it was like, okay, it's on the truck owner, but in this case, you're being held liable for it. You're dealing with this case as the seller of it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. And that's, we live in a state, Alaska, there's no emissions here. I mean, for gas or diesel, there is no emissions period. The only time we really see any interference from the EPA or environmental stuff is out in the oil fields, so a lot of people up here really have that mindset of like, hey, we're up here, we do our own thing. It doesn't matter. The state doesn't enforce it. It doesn't matter. But the truth of the matter is, it is a federal case. It doesn't matter what state you live in. And those waivers don't mean anything. I mean, from personal experience, if you ordered stuff on our website, we had a whole disclaimer that was actually built by an attorney and you physically could not order parts without checking it off. Any sort of invoice or anything that went out. It was literally a situation where there was a disclaimer attached to it. I mean, we covered ourselves more than I think most shops did. And it's still, like I said, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you can put whatever disclaimer you want, but if you violate a federal law, it's there. You violate a federal law.
Now, how long has this been going on? About 2 years that you've been, dealing with the case itself.
Yeah, we're coming up on 2 years here next month, I believe.
How does it progress? Because you'd mentioned the paperwork side of it, and then kind of like where you're at now. How I'm sure there's probably things you can't talk about, but I'm just trying to give a kind of an inside look into what it's like so a shop owner out there understands, kind of what they would be looking at or how it would go. Or maybe somebody's just thinking of setting up a shop, a brand new business, and they're just looking for information on how do I do this right?
Yeah. That's the biggest thing is the biggest thing I can tell any shop owner, right? Maybe setting up a business, or if you're currently doing it, hire an attorney to go through all of the laws, right? Not just emissions laws. Laws in general related to that business, right? Because there's a lot of stuff that it's business owners, and especially you see it in the automotive sector where, we have a passion, right? And we start a business because we have a passion, but not all of us are great business owners. You know what I'm saying? I mean, at the end of the day, we start something for our passion, but that doesn't mean we're a great business person, somebody that can run a business, that sort of thing. And that's what it comes down to. So that would be my first recommendation. As far as the process, I mean, essentially, once you get hit, like I said, it is treated just like a federal case. So there's a process and procedure that it goes through. There are certain things that they request from you. And then as you go forward, you start having court appearances. It is a long process. It is slow. And even, regardless of how much fighting back you do or don't do, I mean, it is a long, drawn out process, and at the end of the day, the feeling that I've gotten is that, they aren't out here. While it may feel like it, right? I mean, when you're on the receiving end, you feel, hey, man, this is a personal attack. This is an attack on us, this, that, and the other. That there's laws, and if we don't agree with the laws, right, there's a way to deal with that and a way not to deal with that. And that's kind of where this goes, is that us going through and violating the laws doesn't make them go away. But yeah, I mean, the process, like I said, it's long, it's drawn out, it costs a ton of money. It costs more money than you can ever think it would, in a lot of these places. I mean, I've talked to shop owners that are, 5, even 6 figures, even one out there that I can reference that I believe is somewhere in the 7-figure range fighting, the case. I've seen a lot of divorces. I've seen a lot of relationship issues. I've seen a lot of stuff, that you don't necessarily think about, right? Like when you put this immense amount of stress on your family, those people around you, I mean, it becomes a situation of your time gets consumed with it. It interferes with, if you maintain the shop, I mean, it's going to interfere with your performance and your ability to show up and do what you need to do. If you don't, and you go back to some type of normal day job type setup, it's going to affect your performance at your day job. It's going to affect those relationships around you. And as things progress, like I said, at some point they come out and they say, hey, look, this is what we could hit you with. This is what we have the evidence to prove. And when you look at that, I mean, you're looking at, I mean, in some cases, if you add up, okay, hypothetically, if I were to get hit with the max and of, the time and the fines, I mean, you're looking at small shops that could be hit with 20, 30 years worth of time in federal prison and millions of dollars of fines, right? Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily what you're going to receive. Every case is different, obviously, but I mean, that's the reality of it. So you look at some of these big companies that are doing stuff, and theirs are far worse, but like I said, it's there is a process through it, and it's not just a simple cut and dry, hey, you get some fines and then we move on. I mean, there's a long drawn out, you're going to spend years of your time, you're going to probably ruin relationships, you're probably going to lose, a lot of stuff in your life by going through this process.
That personal side is really interesting, because I think, stories that we've had on the podcast and just people I've known in any industry, really, when they decide that they want to work for themselves. And that's stressful in and of itself. And then you invest so much time into it and you build it. And then all of a sudden you have something like this happens, which could take it all away. And the emotional and the mental stress of it, and then the people around you, that is something that's really overlooked. And we've never talked with anyone about that, on the podcast, but it's something to factor into this. It's not just the fine. It's not just the legal bills. It's also everything around, personally, professionally, business relationships that are all impacted by something like this.
Right. Yeah. And in some cases, we've seen shops, right? I think we all have, where they go through it. They're still fighting it. They're still open. They're still doing whatever, but the truth of the matter is, we've also seen shops that have shut down, due to situations like this. And at the end of the day, I mean, it's easy for people to say stuff from the outside, but when you're in that situation and you have to tell somebody, say an employee that has a family that relies on your paycheck, hey, we had to shut down. Sorry, you're going to have to go find a new paycheck, or you have customers that, hey, you can't say anything to. And hey, and especially because a lot of these situations you get told to, basically not say anything, be quiet, shut up, don't talk to anybody, and just let things lie. And it creates a lot of stress. Like I said, I mean, there's a lot of other situations associated with it. The rumors start flying and this and that, and then it almost creates a worse situation. So there's, at the end of the day, I'm a big believer in, money's money, right? So at the end of the day, I mean, we can all just, if it's fines, it's not a big deal, but there's so much more behind it that I don't think people truly understand, that it's not just a small fine. It is a major fine that will put burden on you and your family. It has potential to ruin relationships with either your family, close friends, customers, those around you. It has potential for you to physically go to jail, or if you don't go to jail, to carry a federal felony, on your record, which, right, life goes on. A lot of people can get past that. But at the end of the day, the thing to think about that is it does affect it, right? How many jobs, if you're, say, you close the business and you have to go back to a day job, how many jobs do that background check, right? Say you don't own your house and you have to rent, or something happens and you're put in a position where you have to rent going forward. How many rental companies now do a background check, right? And a lot of times they don't even care. Oh, well, this was for removing an exhaust, right? Like, that's not a violent crime. That's not something that would necessarily, but the fact that, boop, red flag, federal felony, right? Like, that can affect a lot of stuff in your life. I mean, you can't get certain jobs in financial, industries because of that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff associated with it that people really don't look at, because I think we get so caught up in the, hey, I want to do what I want to do kind of,
yep. Yeah. That's the, that's a lot of the, I mean, the comments that I'm sure on this episode we'll get as well is, someone out there will say, well, I want to do what I want to do. It's my property. I can do it. But you're right. And I never thought about it like that. I always kind of looked at it like, okay, this is a case. The business is going to change. Maybe the people decide they don't want to do it anymore. I never thought if it progressed to that level, there's a job you might not be able to get. You might not be able to live in a certain area. There might be certain things you can't do that's based on an exhaust system or a tuner or, some plate or something like that. So it's very serious. And I think with a podcast like this, we really wanted to talk, about the education, to educate people, and not just the shop owner, because I know there's a lot of people who just own trucks. They, in a sense, kind of drive the industry with what they want, the things they want to do, the lift kit, the wheels, the tires, the styles, what they want their truck to do. And, when they call around or they're searching, for things online, they're finding that places don't do it. They won't even touch it. They don't do that kind of stuff. And I wanted to help educate them as to why. This isn't just, you pay your 30 grand or 75 grand or 100 grand and all's well. Like, we're talking about federal prison potentially and lives destroyed.
Right. Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, that's what it comes back to, right? Is it, like I said, I mean, it's easy, as a consumer, right? Like, before I had the business, I was a consumer, right? And I was very much of that mindset. It's my truck. I paid for it. I want to do what I want to do. And, nothing you can do to stop me or tell me different. I'm not going to be told. But that's the reality. And that's why a lot of shops are, I mean, everybody is trying to move away from it, or I won't say everybody, but most people are trying to move away from it because of that. I mean, like I said, it is a violation, right? I mean, that's what I'm guilty of, is violating the Clean Air Act or conspiracy. That's, what I've been told. And that's, you don't understand the weight of that, right? And like I said, I mean, it just, there's so much more attached to that when you really start going down that rabbit hole of like, hey, what does this really truly mean, that people don't think about? I mean, for the end user, yeah, does everybody want to turn their truck up? Sure. I mean, we're all gearheads, right? Like, that's why we do this. We love it. But unfortunately, we live in a world where things are changing and we have to adapt. We have to change. And we can drive the change. I mean, look at the companies out there that have really pushed the innovation and push what you can do while still doing that. Companies that have worked or been hit by the EPA are now coming back and saying, look, I have carbon-proof products that, the EPA, they're working with the EPA, right? Like, that at the end of the day, I mean, there's the step of, hey, we want to be a part of the laws being written. But once it gets past that and there's something that is a law, we can argue all day the politics behind it. But in the meantime, let's work together. Let's find a common ground, and let's push the industry forward in a way that isn't ruining people's lives per se, right? Because at the end of the day, let's be honest. You know, the guy that chooses to delete his truck versus not, like that guy's not really losing his, you know, his livelihood or really anything. You know, I mean, there's obviously situations where, okay, the emission system goes down, maybe a guy that's doing hot shotting stuff, you know, situations like that, right? But with anything, I think in the automotive industry, we've had to have an adaptation, I guess, or like a situation where we've overcome technology, right, and move forward. I mean, look at automotive, right? There was a certain period of time where gassers, I mean, you could barely get something coming off the line with 200 horsepower because of all the smog and stuff, you know, and the laws, right? Now we've got 800 plus horsepower cars with factory warranties coming off the lot, right? Without even messing with it. So the diesel industry is no different, right? Like we can do the same thing here. It's being done. And the more we're being forced to do this, the more we can, you know, the more and more you see people striving for that perfection or for that performance while still following within the legal guidelines.
I like that perspective a lot, and this episode really ties together well with another recent one we did with a lawyer talking about the Supreme Court decision and a power plant case. Is I think the perception with enthusiasts is, you know, they want it to be how it used to be back in, you know, with your 12 valve or your 03 to 07 5.9. And on an industry level, yes, you have to progress, get the, you know, either SEMA testing, carb testing, whatever it is, to be able to show, hey, this part, you know, is not, you know, making the truck pollute more. It's still within that framework, and there is a lot of innovation with parts and what these trucks can make with, you know, tuning and turbos and different things that have that testing process. But then also, if people want to see change, you have to change it through the legislative process. It's like you said it very well early. Just because it's a law doesn't mean I ignore it and it goes away. Like it doesn't. So if enthusiasts want to see changes, you have to get involved in the political process. You have to, you know, do those certain things to be able to influence it. Because the way it sits now, it was, you know, signed, you know, into law way back when, and it kind of is what it is.
Right. No, exactly. And that's, you know, that's the thing. I mean, with these agents that are coming knocking on the doors, you know, I mean, there's a side of it where we can argue, you know, how much force is really, you know, necessary in these cases. And that's a whole nother topic, right? But with most of these cases, with most of these agents, right, they're coming, they're knocking on your door, they're serving you with warrants, all that sort of stuff, because they're enforcing a law, right? That's the thing that people have to understand, is you can disagree with what's happening all you want, but at the end of the day, they have a job to do. Right? Like everybody has a job. You go to your job every day and you're told, hey, this is what your job is, get it done. That's what these agents are doing, right? So if you disagree with it, then yeah, I mean, absolutely. You know, if you don't agree with the way something is, then yeah, get involved in the legislative process. You know, we have a process set up for a reason. You know, and at the end of the day, I mean, for years and years and years, there's been, you know, it's been very one-sided. But that's the thing, is that we all have the ability to make our own choices. We all have the ability to get involved in what level. And yeah, I mean, ignoring stuff and saying, well, I don't want to listen because I don't like it. I mean, that's not the answer, right? That's not the world we live in. Unfortunately, it's just not the way things work. So, you know, I mean, yeah, getting involved in the legislative process, getting involved in supporting, you know, the industries and not just, you know, putting your head in the sand. I mean, that's how we see change, right? I mean, if we want to see change, we want things to continue, we want things to be the way we want, we have to actually stand up and do something about it. And ignoring laws or violating laws and just saying, I'll deal with the repercussions later, is not the answer. You know, that
with your, you know, with your business and even the future, you know, where do you see yourself going with it after, you know, after this is finished? Would you, you know, get back into automotive? Would you do this again, or what are your thoughts for, your journey and, in business, and, you mentioned passion and how you're passionate,
Yeah.
about it. Where do you see things going?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I haven't left automotive, right? I shifted gears. We unfortunately had to close the doors on the business, but we shifted gears, and even every single one of my employees, business partners. I mean, they're all still involved in the automotive in some aspect, right? But that's it. I mean, that's the thing, is even my day job now, and I go back and forth, but I think down the road in the future, yeah, I mean, not only helping to educate people, but I mean, ultimate goal would be to get involved in a way that can be meaningful and impactful, in a way that we can move things forward in the industry, not just diesel, but in the automotive industry in general. To be a part of moving that forward and continuing to share this, right? Because I think my ultimate goal is to pass this down, right? Like, my kids love being in the shop. They love tinkering with stuff. Anytime I get my kids involved, like, and that's what it's about, right? Is like continuing this industry, continue to pass down to the next generations. And I think that's the ultimate goal, is that whether it's from a legal side or a business side, or however it plays out in my future, I think that continuing to drive the industry forward and finding a more meaningful role, other than just, hey, I'm a shop owner that got hit by the EPA, to help push things forward, help educate, and really help move things in a positive direction going forward.
That's what I really look forward to is, when I think historically of, the muscle car era, which I wasn't around then, but I've heard about it. And then I hear stories of cars in the, late 70s, early 80s. I mean, probably throughout the 80s. And you mentioned, like, they didn't crack 200 horsepower, to where now you can get something with 807 horsepower. There's all this performance that's there. And, whether it's, that older muscle car or a brand new Hellcat, whatever it might be, we get excited about it. And I think that's what I hope for the most, is that there's there's going to be a time where you could take a diesel truck, you can increase its power and its torque, and you don't have to worry about it. One, as a shop owner, you don't have to worry about selling the parts or installing them. And as a truck owner, you don't have to worry about, can I travel to California with this part? Is it legal everywhere? You can just truly enjoy what it is we all enjoy about automotive, which is performance, power, efficiency, making something unique that's ours. So that's where I hope,
Right.
It goes. And why doing an episode like this is something I really look forward to, because I want to be able to help tell that story and have our listeners understand it, maybe help somebody who's going to open a shop and there's all these parts to pick from to sell. Make sure that you're doing it the right way, so you don't end up in a situation, like yours, or like probably hundreds or thousands of other people have, and you do it different, so you don't have to deal with this.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. I'm right there with you. I think that's the way moving forward. And, I think we're going to see that time, in the future, and it's going to be a great time where people aren't worried about what they have to lose by just enjoying, what they enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like I said in the beginning, I really appreciate you reaching out, telling your story, being willing to tell us about the process, what it was like, and share the insights that you did. I know there's a lot of value and a lot of things you've went through we can all learn from. So I appreciate you reaching out and sitting down with me today and talking about this.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
Don't forget, Diesel fans, make sure and head on over to kershaw.kiausa.com. Use code DIESEL20. Get 20% off site-wide. It's a great way to save some money for a knife you may need for EDC, around the house, work, hunting, fishing, anything like that. It's a really cool code that they've given for our listeners to be able to take advantage and save some money on something they need. I also want to give a shout out to some of our Patreon supporters: Texas Diesel Supply, Wrights Diesel Services, Tyler Loewen at 23 Diesel, Kaleb. We appreciate your guys' support. All of our Patreons, all you guys on Discord, our YouTube subscribers, Instagram, Facebook followers, you guys keep us going with your great ideas for shows, sharing your builds, asking questions, and we appreciate the support you've given us all the way from January 2016 until now. Until next time, keep the shiny side up.